Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to the greatest 900p game of all time, Ryse, Son of Rome. Why are we going back? Well, we haven't had an opportunity to do this in a long while, but the reason we're jumping back is because Gladiator 2 is out now. And over on Retro Rewind, we just watched Gladiator for the first time. Put an asterisk on that one, like my brother loved that movie growing up, so I saw it a few times in passing, but not like a start to finish viewing. But yeah, tremendous movie. So go ahead and check that out if you want our thoughts there. But today, I wanted to talk about the Gladiator game in a lot of ways. A lot of comparisons have been made between Ryse, Son of Rome and Gladiator, and honestly, I've been wanting to have a chance to just shout from the rooftops how excellent I think Ryse, Son of Rome is. It's definitely a game with its flaws. We'll talk about, the quick time events and all that stuff, but I fondly remember my time with Ryse, Son of Rome. Just the entertaining story, the kind of crazy ending, the supernatural parts of the story also caught me off guard, and I kind of thought the combat had a rhythm to it that even though it was QTE filled, was still really enjoyable. And this is a game nowadays that I think if you were to release it in 2024, number one, the visuals stand the test of time, but also I think this game would be coated in yellow paint, telling you wherever to go. Whereas when I returned to it this week, I was really impressed by the amount of effort that went into the environments to kind of tell you where you were going, but also build this world with grand detail and scope. And I just feel like it's a good touch point to go and look at that and say, that was just over 10 years ago, and I don't see any yellow paint in this game. I see occasionally some ropes hanging over the edge, some blue tarp hanging over the edge to tell you where to go, but this yellow paint stuff is a problem in AAA games, and I feel a game like Ryse, Son of Rome, you look at it now and you go, yeah, this would be a game covered in this sort of stuff, but it's not, and I just think it's aged remarkably well. But a lot of people don't agree with that, so why may that be? We'll get into all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Rebound. If you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, consider subscribing. And before we go any further, a quick word from today's sponsor. At the top of 2022, I reviewed Triangle Strategy here on Retro Rebound, and I absolutely adored it because the storytelling allowed me to determine the outcome of the game. There are multiple endings. It's an emotional story. It's very politically driven and fantastic in that regard. But then the gameplay is extremely tactical, and it makes you think, and you have to really strategize and sometimes clench your butt. And the visuals speak for themselves. And now it's available on the MetaQuest store with full 360-degree freedom of movement to survey the battlefield. So basically what you can do is walk around with your hands behind your back like you're the commander at a war table, telling your units, telling your troops what to do, picking them up like pieces on a chessboard, placing them all over the battlefield. It's really cool and oddly empowering. Like, I didn't know if this game would work in VR, but after playing it, I love it. It's possibly my favorite version of the game. And you get to immerse yourself better in these worlds. It plays like a tabletop RPG where I'm just seeing these levels build out in front of me and I'm moving my character around them. So what are you waiting for? Check out Triangle Strategy on MetaQuest 3 and MetaQuest 3S. There will be a link in the description down below. Shout out to them for sponsoring today's video. I know that a lot of people wouldn't like this take, but I was an Xbox One guy for the start of that generation. I know TV, Don Matrick is awful. I run an Xbox show. Like, I know all of this from top to bottom. But at that time, we're coming off the goated Xbox 360 generation. And as badly as Xbox mucked up the first presentation of the next generation console, focusing on TV instead of games, I just had this undeniable faith that this brand would still pull it off. And when I saw the launch lineup, quite frankly, I felt in the right place regardless of that. Yes, the PS4 had the better price point. Yes, the PS4 did a lot of things like being able to share your used games, which Xbox seemed to be veering away from way too early. Like, they were a generation ahead on that mindset. PlayStation 4 made a lot of great choices that made it ultimately the appealing console that generation. But to open things up, I think the launch lineup absolutely, hand over fist, goes to the Xbox One. You had Ryse, Son of Rome, you had Killer Instinct, you had games like Dead Rising 3, which I know is not as good as the original 2, but that was a great launch exclusive. There was Titanfall coming out, Sunset Overdrive. The first 2 years of the Xbox One, I think, are really overlooked. It's just when PlayStation hit their stride, really starting with Bloodborne in my opinion, because it wasn't until 2015 PlayStation got a step on them. But when they started going, boy, did they overpower Xbox famously, as we know. But really, those first 2 years, I gave it to Xbox in the terms of just usage of my console, entertainment, new ideas. Like Titanfall was such a mind-bending game, but I looked at Ryse Son of Rome, and that, I remember that was like the start of everyone focusing on the Ps. How many Ps you got, bro? By that I mean your pixels on screen. And when Ryse Son of Rome was revealed to be a 900p title, a lot of people lost their mind. And playing it even to this day, don't get it. Don't get it. Granted, on PC with its re-release and all the DLC, it's 4K resolution, so you can really admire it more in a modern way. But I wanted to fire up the Xbox One version, put it on the Series X. There's no real back-compat enhancements. The loading screens are a little long when you fire up the campaign. Forgot about that part. But this game still looks wonderful. I always put this game in the same basket as The Order 1886. Both these games were absolutely stunning for their time. Still to this day, stunning. And they had pretty entertaining stories, although I think The Order 1886, by the end of it, was just getting going and it stopped, and that really hurt because we all wanted an Order 1887, and the studio that made it, unfortunately, has shut down. So that'll probably never happen, and I would love it if PlayStation took a risk on something like that. But Ryse Son of Rome reminds me a lot of that game, where it's a looker, it's got some surprisingly entertaining action, like the third-person shooting in The Order 1886. Again, really overlooked, just like I think the third-person action combat in Ryse is really overlooked. What works for me in this? I think it's just a great control scheme and a good flow. So as you're playing as Marius, you're gonna run around, swing your sword, meaning you have a sword attack, you have a shield attack, you can dodge roll for heavy enemies that are gonna hit you, they'll glow red, and you can deflect pretty much every attack that comes your way. I wouldn't put it in the camp at all like something such as an Arkham combat system, but it does have that flow as I'm switching enemy targets and I'm using different things to target different weaknesses. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me though while playing this game again was really the repetitive enemy designs. Like you fight the same people over and over and over, and when they're like masked up, it matters a little bit less. But when you're fighting like these same shielded characters that have a big gut and long black hair and a big beard, you're like, I've killed you 80 times before. But it's kind of just like a video game in that way. Like that's the video game part of it. Like it looks really good, but yeah, it'll repeat those enemy designs, but it kind of communicates to you what you need to do. Like, oh, that's an enemy that is going to deflect all of my sword attacks, so I need to shield attack him, versus just a common enemy coming your way where I can use my sword attack on them, and then you set up the execution. This is where the QTEs come in. This was the other controversial part of the game, and a lot of people were wondering, like, can we shut off the QTEs? And like, even to this day, to my understanding, there's just no way to turn it off, but you can just mash your way through this. So obviously when a character turns a certain color, you know, yellow, you press Y, blue, you press X, and so on. But if you get those buttons wrong, the execution still goes through, which I think was a good choice, by the way, because I just feel like you're bound to fail one of these, and to not secure your kill because of that kind of shows the problem with the system in the first place. It's like, okay, what are the QTEs for? They're for a point system. It doesn't matter if you're like me and who's played and beat this game 3 times now, like where Ryse Son of Rome, you get XP, you can invest it in skills, you can level up your focus pool, your health pool, how much XP you get per kill. I got all the collectibles in this game. Like I was looking at my timeline in this game, I just have everything in it. Like I love this game unapologetically at launch, but that is why the QTEs matter. But it's kind of a self-defeating mechanic at the end of the day. And I don't think it's perfect. I think it could be done better. But what I will say is without those executions, I think it dramatically changes what makes Ryse such an appealing game to people. Like it is that presentation, it is that brutality, and those executions to me, they're kind of like Doom in a way. They just don't get old. Like just watching me spin around an enemy and just impale them through the back of their neck and watching my sword fly through, and the detail and the facial animations on both Marius and the enemy I'm attacking, I still think it's quite remarkable in that way. Like I really enjoy the combat for as simple as it is. It is why I kind of loved that part of the 360 generation, like the later part of the 360 generation into the early Xbox One days, where you were still getting these creative PS2, GameCube, original Xbox era ideas, but on a bigger budget. And the gameplay wasn't quite perfected yet. Like I feel nowadays, if you made Ryse Son of Rome, you probably go, oh yeah, it's gonna be God of War style gameplay, which don't get me wrong, would be incredible. But the QTEs do represent a period in time, a point in time where this sort of stuff kind of was okay for some people. Not everyone. Like for me back then, I didn't care. And playing it now, I'm like, no game's really doing this, so I still don't really care, because we don't have many games where executions are just quickly done by QTEs and it's over and done with. But this was a major sticking point for the game, the 900p and the QTEs, and that kind of snowballed the Xbox One. I remember people were like, no, like, we're not buying quick time events and 900p games on your next gen consoles. And that kind of pixels argument would gain steam as the generation would go on, and pretty much every game would look better on the PS4. But the presentation and the combat mechanics, like the control scheme, just really work for me. Still to this day, I get why people wouldn't like it, but it still does work for me. Even more so because I dove deep into the multiplayer. They had a gladiator mode, very clearly inspired by the Gladiator movie. You go in, there'd be like traps set up. You could do this in co-op if you wanted to, which I did it for a little bit. And you could level up and everything inside this mode. And there was other skills you could unlock, particularly for co-op, although the tree was significantly smaller. So you would get things like co-op takedowns, which was really cool. But that was really it. I just wish that they continued this series, because I think it was a crime to do a one-off and abandon it. It definitely makes it like a very unique launch game, especially now when you look at the Series X and S, which I was really excited for, but there was no launch game. It was really like Game Pass and some next-gen updates, and that was really it. It was kind of disappointing, It was extremely disappointing, to be clear. Whereas you looked at PlayStation 5 with Demon's Souls Remake, and just like with the last generation where Xbox One had the game, so that's where my time was spent, PS5 to open up the generation, easy time spent. I'll play Miles Morales. I'll play Demon's Souls remakes. Like, these games matter to me more than the hardware and the pixels, that sort of thing. And so that's what brought me to Ryse Son of Rome. I was like, this looks really good. And so my friends picked it up at launch day. Like, I have a picture on my Instagram still of that launch day for the Xbox One where I had Ryse Son of Rome. I somehow bought Call of Duty Ghosts, and I got Dead Rising 3. And what I loved about these games, in particular, Ryse Son of Rome had a great New Game Plus mode where your upgrades would carry over. I'd get all the missing collectibles, 100% the game, which is what I ended up doing. And then Dead Rising 3 was really awesome because, like, this was a big game. And that's all I cared about. I didn't have a lot of money. Like, I saved up a ton for my Xbox One because, yes, it was more expensive than the PS4. So I saved up enough for it, grabbed that, and I was like, Dead Rising 3, like, I'll be playing this game easily, like 30, 40 hours. And I happily did that. Again, co-op was a big thing for me too. Xbox Live, that was my social life. So to have co-op games, a co-op mode in Ryse, a co-op mode in Dead Rising 3. I know I'm turning this into a big Xbox One conversation, but I really do think the start of that generation was extremely underrated despite all of the issues Xbox had with TV, focus on exclusives. I feel the opening games were convincingly really good. Ori and the Blind Forest, hello? Am I insane for this? I thought the Xbox One was a great start. It ended horribly. I barely turned on my Xbox One after 2014, swear on my life, but those first 2 years, my Xbox One was getting a lot of reps. I have a little bit more to say about Ryse Son of Rome, but first, let's do this for the first time in a while, and that is the complete in-box experience. I know a lot of people have been asking, like, Maddie, why haven't you been doing a lot of these? And we've been doing a lot of reviews lately, and then some of the games we've been covering are ridiculously expensive where I don't have enough money to get them all, but I've had this bad boy in my collection since day one, as you can see here on the top. So I'm happy to show you what came with a day one copy of Ryse Son of Rome, because also some of the games we have talked about don't have complete in-box experiences, so I apologize for the delay in one of our favorite segments here on the channel, but let's get into it and see what Ryse Son of Rome has on the inside. All right, we have Ryse Son of Rome for the Xbox One, day one, 2013. Hey, Xbox, if you're porting games, this is one you should bring to the PlayStation Nation. Just saying, I'd love for more people to talk about this game and see just how great it really is. This day one banner throws me back. I remember my Xbox One controller had the day one 2013 mark on it. Felt like a big celebration. The back says, day one 2013 again, fight as a soldier, lead as a general, rise as a legend. It's hard for the camera to focus because this is all reflective. Look at that. It says includes exclusive multiplayer map and sword with bonus attributes, as well as Xbox bringing the brutal intensity of close quarters combat to life in visceral detail, as well as stepping into the breathtaking recreation of the Roman Empire and battling hordes of enemies for fame and glory in the multiplayer Coliseum, which I thought was just such a nice touch, such a nice add-on. Here on the inside, this is where Xbox went wrong. We all know about this. The disc on the left, it's just not right. It's just not right. Like, this should never have been changed. It was just such a moment of like, look, everyone, we're different. I'm like, why? Why would you ever put the, like, it just encompassed everything wrong with Xbox that generation, that the games were on the left side. But nonetheless, you have the beautiful disc here, same art as you get on the cover. And it does come with a little add-on slip here. And this is the game code for what would activate 3 days of Xbox Live Gold. So get in on those parties with your Connects. I remember I was actually like streaming to my friends, my like webcam on the Connect in like Skype calls and stuff. Oh wait, I'm sorry. There are two slips here. Sorry, that was the 3-day Xbox Live Gold trial I showed you. And then this is the day one DLC that was mentioned on the back here. And yeah, I know these are kind of like useless nowadays, but it's just such a good memory to just see what these games came packaged in with all that time ago. So very small complete box experience, but compared to what we get nowadays, I would take this any day with Ryse, Son of Rome. So I've talked your ear off about the gameplay. I want to talk to you about the story. Now, after watching Gladiator, I have to say that a lot of people claimed that Ryse, Son of Rome stole a lot of ideas from that movie, which I think many games are extremely guilty of. And as I've done more movie watching on Retro Rewind, I think some games are far more egregious of stealing ideas. I feel like Ryse, Son of Rome does a couple of things to make it feel distinct. It is, at the end of the day, by its core DNA, very similar to Gladiator. You kind of have this fallen general that is rising up and fighting a corrupt power inside of Rome. Although this story is a lot less personal if you don't care about Marius, but I think they did a really good job with this character, right? You start off this story, he's like, save your emperor, right? Save your emperor. And then of course, Marius is going in to try and help. And he's like, who I am doesn't matter, but you need to know my story. And it goes all the way back in time. Like, what got us to that moment? And I think it is not like a jaw dropper by any means, but extremely entertaining to see like Marius continue to rise up the ranks, see the personal tragedy he goes through, his vow for vengeance, very similar to something like Gladiator as well. But some of the supernatural twists, like there was one point that he's walking around in the beginning of the game and some spirit shows up and is like, you want to go that way? Because if you go the other way, you're dead. And she saved him because there was a ton of enemies on the other side of that wall that would have stormed through and killed him in an instant. So right there, I think a separation is made, but I really do think it's the romp between the performance of all of these characters. I think the motion capture has aged phenomenally well. So it doesn't even feel like a product of its time in the terms of storytelling where you have to just kind of accept some of the jank. I still think it looks really good. I already talked about that on a visual front, but just how the characters are performed, how they look, their facial expressions. I think all of it has aged so well. You could play it today and be fooled that like, hey, this game came out a few years ago. It was like a little bit of a lower budget AAA game in the scheme of things, but yeah, like this just came out. I feel like you could truly fool someone with it especially if you played it on PC with the 4K resolution. I don't think many people would know the difference. Without spoiling anything for those who haven't played it, because by the way, this game's, I was looking on Steam, it's like $10. It's on Game Pass as well. Whatever way you want to play, do it. It really is super entertaining. But I thought the ending was like, I remember my jaw did drop. Granted, I was in college. I was like 18 at the time, so a little bit of an easier target. But I remember just being so shocked with how it ended and how epic and intense and other emotions I felt during it. I was like, man, that was really good. And it was so good that it provided the best feeling I think a game can, which is I'm not ready to walk away quite yet. Like the only thing I was left feeling with Ryse, Son of Rome once it was done was less loading screens. Kind of wish there was more enemy variety for sure, because I can see the QTEs wearing people down, but I think that combat flow really works for me. And the other thing, quite frankly, I wish it was a little bit longer. I wanted to spend more time in this world with these characters. I was hoping for more, DLC, which it did get 4 pieces, but a lot of it was focused on the multiplayer. Like one of them does add the Crisis skin in, but I just love these characters. I love this world. I was like, man, I wish there was just a little bit more of this. So yeah, I think it's a really good time. Like the story is enjoyable. It's not going to be one you remember forever, but I think there's something to be said, right? There's an intangible about, hey, I played this game, and of course there was the hype of the launch lineup, but I even go back to it now and I'm like, this is still really good. For a game to stick with you for that long, certain shots, certain visuals, like the one behind me, this is the E3 level that they showed off when the game was first revealed, but like leading into it is a ton of epic moments. Like the game has a consistent high quality, where at that point in time, for those who don't know, E3 levels were famous. Like they would always be the best slice of the game because that's what they showed off to investors, that's what they showed off to press, and it would always be a completely different feel from the rest of the game. So one thing I really respected about Ryse, Son of Rome is it was just smooth along the top. Everything was nice and even. What you got in the beginning of the game and the E3 level, and at the end, it was all nice and even. Like it was all high quality stuff. Like some of the cutscenes, like when you're storming the beach and you're looking up, you're watching like these catapults launch like fireballs into ships. You have Roman soldiers storming the beach. Like, this game is epic. And I think if you can just bite into that kind of popcorn flick vibe that this game provides and get surprised by an entertaining plot and really draw yourself to Marius, like, you'll be surprised with what this game does for you. But I'll just say that I would love to see more Ryse Son of Rome. You know, Crytek is still kicking around, which is crazy to think about. I'm not a big Crysis fan, but I am a big Ryse fan, and I would love to see a little bit more of that Ryse Son of Rome. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, just wanted to celebrate one of our best Roman games, if you will, with the release of Gladiator 2. So, I leave it in your hands now. Do you have great memories of the Xbox One generation at all? Am I crazy for saying that? Do you have great memories with Ryse Son of Rome? I want to hear them all. Fire away down below. Other than that, I'll catch all of you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.